crazy. I was talking with one of the OGs in the Christian rap market, who shall remain nameless.
Amen.
But we were talking about sort of the climate of things in the music industry, in the Christian music industry, the climate of things socially in America, and it boiled down to a conversation about the impact that the rappers are having from the Christian camp, or some may call them Christian rappers, right? And he asked me a question. He asked, do I see a difference in how Christian rap moves now, having been influenced by Reform thought, maybe Calvinism, and how it functioned and flowed when Christian rap was primarily in the black church, some might say in the charismatic space. So with those two different paradigms, what social impact, what theological impact do you see when you contrast them? And what was some of the good on this side and some of the not so good on that side, and vice versa? And when he posed the question, I was like, man, that's good to consider, because it informs us as a community of young artists who want to make an impact in the world for the good, what things to hold on to and what things to resist. You feel me? And so my response to it was just, full disclosure. I think personally, so I grew up in the city, in the hood, right? Became a Christian at 16. And then at my local church, started doing music, sharing my faith through music. And things that were important were things like reminding people that God loves them, reminding people that God has a plan for them, and sort of instilling that sense of purpose and identity in my black church context, in my hood hip hop expression. Right. So those were things that were championed and heralded from the pulpit. And then as an artist, I translated them into the music. Right. So because of that, I think when I needed most a better understanding on my experience as a young black male, when I needed a grasp and understanding on what God had to say about that, I think there was certain tailor emphasis that really helped me mature as a young Christian. And it was really helping my soul think through, you know what? I remember my pastor saying stuff like, you don't have to only work at the McDonald's, you can own the McDonald's. Right. And it was sort of like those motivational, empowering statements coupled with Bible that gave you a full sort of understanding of who you are, what you can bring to the table, connected to your Christianity and your social impact in the world, right?
Right. Which to that, some would say, that Christian teaching shouldn't be the same as motivational teaching. Right. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So there's a presupposition already that that may be wrong. Or a deviation from what the expectation is from the pulpit. And then as things would, happen or have it, as life would have it, I later was exposed to Reform thought, Calvinism, and I remember buying more into ideas like you're a sinner in such a way that you mean nothing. You're just a filthy maggot. Yeah. Right? Now, they would still couple it with Imago Dei, or just, this high value that God places on us since we're made in his image. But at the same time, there was this emphasis on how dirty, how bad we were, how totally depraved I was, which was a deviation of the style of preaching that I was used to. And in trying to understand that and trying to embrace that new approach to an understanding of self, I think there was a shift that happened in my own soul and then later in my music. And then all of a sudden now that's being exported out into everywhere my music was distributed.
Yes.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And now here we are. You see the climate of things because of the cell phone, and I wonder, has it made me a bit insensitive? Has it made me a bit disconnected from the ground level? And is there a collective conscious? Has that affected all of us as artists?
Yeah. Yeah.
And if so, how do we recover what we lost without having to abandon maybe some of the good things that we gained along the way? Do you see?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Like it sounds like, and we migrated away from. It's kind of what we're always talking about. We're always. It seems like so much of what we end up focusing on is trying to find the middle, trying to get as we are kind of wrestling through some of this stuff for ourselves personally, or have maybe certain experiences where we've evolved and found ourselves either too far right or too far left, and are now kind of moving towards the middle or finding the middle a little bit more than maybe in times past. It seems like we're trying to help other people to do the same thing. Because this just sounds like you did what we do as humans.
Right.
Like,
Okay. Yeah.
Like, it's like at one point I held to one thing.
Yeah.
And then another thing got my attention.
Yeah.
I was drawn to that thing. And as opposed to finding a way to pull those two things together, I forsook one for the sake of the other. And I think that the answer to your question is that's always dangerous. It's always bad.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It's always bad. It's always unhealthy. And I would even say has potentially contributed to some of even maybe the larger problems that we're having. Maybe we'll talk about that a little bit later. But some of the larger problems that we're having, particularly amongst people of color and African Americans, with regards to Christianity. How has that swing? Because now we're in an age of empowerment, amongst, African Americans and people of color. Everything is about, kind of being strengthened and emboldened and empowered in your blackness and your abilities. And your pastor was like, you can do. You was like, I can do it.
Yeah.
He was like, I can make it.
Yeah.
I could be the owner.
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Right. Yeah.
And you probably felt like you got talked out of that in a sense, like out of the spirit of it.
Yeah.
You follow me?
Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that. Yeah, I think that's a big question to ask, and it's a big question to ask, one, for ourselves, and then for probably everybody, particularly those who have been influenced by Christian hip hop and those who have been the kind of leaders or the voices in Christian hip hop, have to ask the question of how has the migration away from, and maybe we're migrating back towards it now. I think maybe we are. Some of that might be coming back. There may be a resurgence. It might be recovering on its own as the tide is turning in the culture as a whole. You mean a
recovery of some of the good things?
Some of the good things
from the black church experience. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because I think like I think some of that might be coming back right now. But I think that's a good point you make too. Just to like as a caveat, it's not to say that everything that we gained from the black church and allowed to inform our music was necessarily healthy or even balanced. But that's not to say that none of it was either. And so the parts of it that were good, the moment that we got rid of those, we actually lost a piece of ourselves.
Yeah. Right.
You know what I'm saying?
That's more so what I'm thinking about too. Is that it's like an essential quality that was relinquished, maybe even unbeknownst to ourselves.
Yeah.
But when I look at the collective conscious of the Christian rap, or whatever you want to call it, movement, I think of, for example, when a lot of this, at least in our generation, really hit the fan with Trayvon Martin and then Mike Brown, right? So that's sort of like probably the marker of when the church started to think a little deeper about these things, right?
Yeah.
Because really, from the civil rights movement to like right up to like Trayvon,
Yeah.
the church hadn't really talked much about social justice or social injustice. It was pretty much, if you were in a prosperity-driven church, you were talking about prosperity. If you were in a reform-driven church, you were talking about doctrines of grace and so on and so forth. But then this social conversation.
Well, there were black liberation.
Right. So there were churches then, but it was pockets. It wasn't like a big conversation.
Of course. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So I'm just saying, in everybody's respective corners, they were sort of
talking about their thing. Yeah.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So but you do right to bring that up, because churches have been, a lot of people have been on this.
Yeah.
Before it was kind of like,
and they were demonized. This
right.
is to your point.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
We called it social gospel.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right.
Black liberation theology.
Yes.
We labeled it something that had a negative slant on it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. And then you get the Trayvon and unfortunate situation, and then the Mike Brown unfortunate situation. And the church now is thinking, how are we going to respond? What are we going to say? And my point of bringing that up is to say, I think as a collective conscience, not that there weren't Christian rap artists who had been informed and knew what to say, but collectively, it seems like our sentiments for engaging social justice were very weak.
Yeah.
The reflex, that muscle was sort of unexercised.
Yeah.
And a lot of Christian artists or young Christians in general, or churches, pastors alike, were kind of stumped. Like, what do we say? How does the church respond? I remember in St. Louis, a lot of churches started to come together from across the spectrum, right? Mm-hmm. Black, white, brown. Mm-hmm. And that was the main question. And I remember sort of asking that same question and being taken back that so many of us didn't know what to say.
We had to ask that question. The fact that we had to ask that question.
You feel me? The fact that we even had to ask was sort of telling as to where our priorities have been.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? And I think the thing that's unique and unfortunate about that is, in a civil rights space, the black church understood that pretty well.
Absolutely.
Right? They were forced to carry those things in balance at all times, thinking about Christianity, the faith of Christianity, while also thinking about how I'm going to maneuver in society so as to sustain my life and stay alive and fight for equality and justice. That was a natural sort of dichotomy that you carried in yourself if you were a Christian at that time period. Either you were on the wrong side of it in a racist way, you carried that understanding, or you were on the right side of it and you were fighting for justice and equality as a black citizen, and you carry both of those.
Well, I remember honestly, we don't know how we all have been negatively impacted by maybe reform thinking, maybe just white evangelicalism, and how that's shaped us in this conversation about in our music, how that's impacted our music. It's interesting to look at the gospel industry, because the gospel industry, in as much as some had demonized them, they have been able to kind of stand the test of time. They seem unmoved and unfazed. And maybe it does have something to do with the fact that they came out of the civil rights movement. So holding those things in balance was not, and the expression of it kind of being, prevalent in their music. Maybe they didn't. I mean, many of them are my friends. They didn't think twice about this stuff. Like, this is not even a conversation. We're talking to the downtrodden, marginalized, you know what I'm saying?
Right.
Like,
they maintain
broken,
that.
Destitute people who have been, you know what I'm saying?
And you know what? You're right.
That's always been interesting. But I was going to say, I can even see within myself, like the years ago when Prop and Show, years ago. Now, because of my wiring, I never went hard in any one direction, because I'm wired to take a step back and try to understand. But my knee-jerk reaction was, when Show and Prop and all these, like, they were moving more in that direction. It's like they're moving into social spaces, having conversations surrounding these these real life on the ground, concrete
Yeah.
issues that people of color, that are unique to people of color and
Yeah.
African Americans. And again, you're so hardwired to now, but not even hardwired. You've just been wired to think, wait, we should be talking about justification by faith. Dude, you know what I'm saying?
Yes.
We should be talking about
Yes.
why we broken, not just that. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like, now again, I never came off that way because I've always processed it. But the fact that I had to take a step back to try to process it,
Yes.
is the problem in and of itself. Like,
Right.
how did I get there?
Right.
Where I'm now wrestling with, is it okay that they're not talking about justification by faith and
Yeah.
maybe are talking about a more horizontal justification?
Yes.
You know what I'm saying?
Right, exactly. And that's what I'm wondering, would we have maintained that had we understood better, the risk of abandoning those cultural reflexes. Right? I think and I'm using Reformed theology on purpose because that became the dominant theological sway on Christian rap. I mean, anybody that's honest will have to admit that.
Yeah.
I think what came with that was a prioritization of European Reformation influence on young black thinkers. Right? We didn't read books from Christian civil rights leaders.
Yes.
You know what I'm saying? Because we would have thought that was social gospel. We would have thought that
Yes.
was, or we wouldn't have even been risky enough as a collective to read a social gospel book and try to extract the good from it.
Yeah.
And throw away the bones because we would have been afraid, or intimidated or thought it was just a theological deviation from sound doctrine, right? We would have been, and I think that was sort of massaged out of us in the name of God's true priorities, God's true heart and intentions.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I think now it's important to think about, okay, let's call that out. We have to sort of deconstruct that notion.
Yes, I agree.
Because there's so many people now that are African American that are still sort of entangled in like I was perhaps at some point, like many of us, entangled in just give them the gospel, right? Like that sort of notion of the eternal thing is the most pressing reality for today's social climate. Just abandon ship. Jesus come quick. You know what I mean? And it's like, is that what the Bible is saying? Or is that something you learn from another tradition that should be dismissed like the bad of the social gospel? Like that callous, dismissive attitude needs to be dismissed with the same intensity with which you want to dismiss certain things from the social gospel. So we have to sort of like deconstruct that, call it out, and then paint a way forward that's more of a healthy expression, which carries, the concept that these things on the ground are important to God. They're important to humanity, and they also don't contradict our Christianity.
Yes.
And in fact, on an industrial level, you brought up the gospel community. You look at the Stella Awards.
Yeah.
The little bit I know about the history of it is there was a time period where, black gospel artists couldn't get respect and a seat at the table for their contribution to Christian music, and they're in a white market, so therefore they had to start their own galas and their own regional connectivity, and then it sort of culminates in the Stellas. Where they are able to celebrate their blackness, their Christianity and blackness, not against whiteness, but just celebrating what God has done with this community and tribe of people.
Yes.
And then not only is it a celebration of that, but it's a maintenance of some of those cultural sensitivities. You don't have to work at the McDonald's. You can own the McDonald's. There's still a maintenance of those contextual things that need to be said where people didn't get certain things from their household, certain nurture and care, and then show how that is also a part of God's good ideas for the world.
Yeah.
And they've industrialized that. They have marketing dollars, sponsorships, and they put together a great entertaining experience with it as well. And you think, man, how dope would it be for Christian rap to potentially move in that direction?
Yeah.
Where we're a fuller expression of maybe what God had in mind for this expression of art, culture, diversity, but in particular, how to stay who you are if you're African American, if you're, you know what I'm saying? You don't have to abandon parts of yourself to become a success or get exposure. And I think that's where the conversation needs to go, because we have a lot more work that can be done, a lot more influence that can be had. And it would just be a matter of people being passionate about that and sort of.
Yeah, we take our cues. We need, and the part of to me, the deconstruction for us is really kind of looking at the things that we once saw as a problematic, not just in terms of like, not just in terms of terms, but because we actually have real life examples of people who did something that was considered a deviation at one point, and stayed the course. We can kind of look to them as points of reference now, like the gospel community. Like, who do we need to be as we're deconstructing and reconstructing? Who do we need to be in moving forward? What pieces do we need to add to become a more a fuller expression of all of what God has said and wants to, communicate through us as his people, as artists? I actually have the gospel community now. Right. The people that I once maybe looked at as something other than.
And look, I don't want to romanticize that either, too, because I do remember even the gospel community wouldn't embrace us, which I think sort of made the quandary more complex.
It does, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? It was like, man, we're your nephews, your sons, your cousins.
Yeah.
I'm black, you black, but it was a sense in which they didn't understand the youthful expression of music through rap.
Yes.
That I think maybe made the sort of confusion.
They understood it from their context. So coming out of that civil rights space, hip hop was this other thing. Yeah. And again, it's not to romanticize them or let them off the hook. Right. It's just to say obviously it's that blind spot. It was that blind spot for them. You know what I'm saying? Yep. So but we've seen them come towards us and say, hey, like just yesterday, the Stellars posted something with me, Lecrae, and Canton Jones. And said top 4. This was the top 4 historic moment in all of Stellar history. You see, so they're going through the same process. Everybody's in that same.
Yep, I love it.
You see what I mean? So we can kind of all take cues from each other. And there's something about what we brought to the table from a doctrinal standpoint and an emphasis on theology that was not just, social or on the horizontal or on the ground level that they draw from.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying?
Yes.
So it is all full circle, and I can see how we can take our cues from everybody ranging from the Show Barakas to the Stellar Awards and then vice versa.
Yeah. So it shows a need for that. For that open dialogue.
And
not asking people to abandon portion of themselves or.
I love that.
Yeah. That's good, man. Make sure you hit that notification bell after you subscribe. You don't want to miss this complicated ish.